So, hi everyone. My name is Mariloue Daudier. I'm the Senior Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisor at D2R. I am glad to welcome you to our first event in honor of Pride Month, Opportunities and Challenges of the 2SLGBTQIA+ community in RNA research. So for today's webinar, I will start by sharing a short introduction, then there will be a very interesting conversation between our moderator, Amirah-Iman and our guest speakers, Raquel Martin and Benjamin Kaufman. Then you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. So for the logistics of the event, to do so, you have two options. You can either use the Zoom Q&A function or request to unmute yourself. And please note that this webinar will be recorded and it will be shared through our YouTube page. So to start, I would like to share that I use the pronouns she and her. Sharing the pronouns that we refer to, whether we identify as a member of the 2SLGBTQIA+ community or not, is important to do because it normalizes gender diversity and the fact that our physical appearance doesn't necessarily determine the gender that we identify with. So we can do that through LinkedIn titles, through our email signatures, and also when we speak at events like today. So I would also like to take a moment to share an acknowledgement. The D2R initiative at McGill University is on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. We acknowledge and thank the diverse peoples whose presence mark this territory on which peoples of the world now gather. Sharing this land acknowledgement is particularly important in the context of Pride Month because the 2SLGBTQIA+ acronym actually has an important Indigenous component. The 2S at the beginning of the acronym refers to bispiritual, which describes Indigenous people that really play a traditional third gender role in their communities, or any other Indigenous people that may refer to another gender variant that play a role in their community. So I invite you in the context of this activity today to actually think about the intersectionality between Indigenous people and the 2SLGBTQI+ community. So for those of you who don't know about D2R, D2R, we are an initiative that is from McGill University, and our goal is really to have an inclusive Canadian approach to genomic-based RNA therapeutics. And we aim to deliver really genomic-based RNA therapies to populations that may be affected by neglected diseases, rare diseases, infectious disease, or chronic diseases like cancer. And as a Senior Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisor at D2R, I have the privilege to really implement actions from our EDI action plan that have three main focus areas. So the first area is around supporting equity-deserving groups progression in RNA research. So to do so, we have initiatives such as the community of practices we have guides and tools that are available on our website. I invite you to consult them. The second focus area is really around applying EDI in research. So to do so, we have really the best EDI practices in our EDI requirements for our funding opportunities, and we have rigorous EDI review processes. And our final focus area is around really understanding challenges and opportunities in terms of EDI in RNA research. So to do so, you'll see in a few months, some of you will receive a climate survey. Please, please, please complete it. We're working hard on it, and it will help us understand better our community. And also we have trainings that will be coming up and events like today, awareness activities. So we do awareness activities for different equity deserving groups, including women, people with disabilities, Indigenous people, of course, Black people, Caribbean, African, and members of the 2SLGBTQIA+ community. And I think in the context of today's world, where there's a lot of backlash on the 2SLGBTQIA plus community, it is more important than ever to actually take the time to understand the challenges, but also the opportunities to empower the 2SLGBTQIA plus community. And there's so many ways to do so, particularly in RNA research. We're going to give you a glimpse today, but there could be like so much more that could be said. And to explore all these ways to do that, I am glad to introduce you to the moderator for today's event, Amirah-Iman, who is the EDI advisor at the Pan-Canadian Genome Library. Have a great webinar, everyone.
Thank you, Mariloue. Hello, everyone. Bonjour. My name is Amirah-Iman Hicks. I am the EDI advisor of the Pan-Canadian Genome Library, like Mariloue said. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm located on the unceded territories of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples. Also, I promote decolonization in my daily life by continuously learning about Indigenous rights and traditions. I'm honored to be your moderator today. I'm sure this will be a very fruitful discussion. As I mentioned, I work as the EDI advisor of the PCGL, the Pan-Canadian Genome Library, which is an initiative funded by the Canadian Institute for Health Research, as well as Genome Canada, that aims to establish a framework for managing and sharing of Canada's human genomic data. The PCGL unifies Canada's human genome sequencing efforts and sets out a central federated data management system that leverages international standards and respects the limitations on the jurisdictional and cultural movement of human genetic data. We aim to include equity, diversity, and inclusion principles in our work to capture the genetic diversity of the Canadian population and to ensure that the benefits of genomics are shared equitably across Canada's diverse communities. As D2R and PCGL share common EDI goals, and as well as I have a personal interest in this in addressing the challenges and opportunities for the 2S LGBTQIA community in RNA research, I'm happy to be here and ensure that we have a great discussion that focuses on underrepresented and historically excluded communities as well, which is why I'm here to moderate this. I'm also a member of D2R's EDI community of practice, and I believe that today's event is a concrete way for us to work together to promote EDI in our spaces. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for being here. I'd like to also thank our special guests. And when I name each of you, feel free to introduce yourselves and to share a bit about yourself and your research. So first, we have the D2R researcher and assistant professor in human genomics at McGill, Raquel Cuella Martin. Raquel?
Hey, thank you, Amirah. Thank you, Mariloue, for a great introduction. Hey, everyone. Thank you for making the time during your lunch break for this webinar today. So as Amirah was mentioning, my name is Raquel Cuella Martin, and my pronouns are she, her, elle. I'm originally Spanish, and I have lived and trained as a researcher in Spain, the UK, the US, and now here in Canada, where I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Human Genetics and a member of the Daudier Institute and the Circle of Genomic Medicine, and also an associate member of the Goodman Cancer Center. So I'm lucky here at McGill to have a talented research team that they are working right over there in using high-throughput genome engineering approaches to address complex biological questions. So we are part of the D2R family, and particularly on how our work is related to understanding, for instance, T-cell receptor antigen interactions, but also using genomics approaches to develop therapeutics for cancer and rare disorders. Within D2R, I wear some additional hats, one of them as the chair of the Partners and Community Engagement Committee, which is the governance body that works with Mariloue and the D2R administration and leadership to ensure that EDI is considered at every step of the way within this big initiative of creating RNA therapeutics. And today I'm here to share my thoughts and perspective as a faculty member, as a scientist, but even more relevant as a lesbian woman, and which is an honor for me to be part of this table. And I think, these conversations, like the one we're having today, are extremely important as we navigate how our research environments and our research itself considers the different realities of what we call the queer community in broad terms.
Thank you, Raquel. Next, we have our second speaker, who is a PhD candidate in human genetics, Benjamin Kaufman. Ben.
Hi there. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Benjamin. My pronouns are he, him, and il. I'm currently a PhD candidate in the Department of Human Genetics, where I study population genetics under the supervision of Dr. Claude Berret. My research focuses on the demographic history and health equity of Canada's Jewish population, particularly hoping to uncover variants of rare disease and elevate health equity initiatives within this community, which has been under-researched in population genetics up to this point. Um, My background's a bit interdisciplinary. I hold a master's degree in biological anthropology from the University of New Brunswick here in Canada, but I'm originally from the US, and I received my bachelor's in forensic biochemistry from the University of Central Florida. So I really appreciate integrating sociocultural perspectives into scientific research, which is why I'm really excited to be participating in today's conversations, both as a researcher and as a gay man myself, being able to understand the differences of realities and the way that our research can have real world impacts on communities that have been historically underserved. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, thank you. So for everyone in the audience, please note that at the end of the webinar, we'll have a Q&A session. Please use the Q&A function to ask your questions. So you'll see at the bottom of the Zoom window, there's a Q&A with a box with a question mark in it. You can submit your questions there. You can also make requests to unmute yourself to ask your question out loud. So if that's done, I will read the questions out, or I'll call on you to unmute yourself, and then you can ask your questions at the end. For our discussion, it'll be divided into 3 parts. The first will be discussions on research practice, the second on research design, and the third on inequities towards the 2SLGBTQIA community in RNA therapeutics, excuse me. So starting with part 1 on research practice, Benjamin, first I'll start with you. From a student perspective, what are some challenges that you've observed in terms of the inclusion of the 2SLGBTQIA community in research practice?
Thank you. I think the first thing that comes to my mind is the fact that there are few openly two-spirit LGBTQIA faculty members or PIs, especially in STEM, which limits mentorship opportunities or access to visible role models. And this can this can lead to a sense of isolation for aspiring career researchers. It could also lead to a assumption of heteronormativity in a lab setting. If you don't see people of diverse backgrounds, you're not going to accommodate diverse backgrounds. This can also lead to a culture of microaggressions or lack of awareness for community members, which can further contribute to this sense of isolation for people who would otherwise be aspiring researchers who would want to participate in this type of research, and are otherwise discouraged. So yeah.
Thank you. And it's very true that heteronormativity is something that's very prevalent, because unless you ask someone or someone tells you what they identify as, it's not something that you can visibly see. So it's very true. Thank you. Raquel, do you have similar observations?
Yeah, actually, I was going to link on that, because one of the things that came to my mind was how, there's always these general assumptions, right? Assumptions about your gender, assumptions about your sexual orientation, and those things are like if we talk about microaggressions, but to me, even when they are not even a microaggression, you're just ignoring a reality. You don't need to be purposely trying to damage somebody, but you're just like, okay, so what about your husband, or what about your wife, instead of asking with general terms, or like your partner, your significant other. There are many ways to use that inclusive language and avoid misgendering. And I think the English language makes it easy for us with the they, them pronouns. Not having to just assume a she or he binary reality, right? And one of the things I think, when I link with Benjamin, and perhaps from my perspective, one of the things that I think I have observed is coming from the students, perhaps that fear of rejection, right? Disclosing your reality when you see what is around you and you perceive it as very cis heteronormative, and you be like, will I fit in there?
Absolutely. Jumping off of that, I feel like there's also a sense of a fear of being out in science might limit your ability to propel yourself professionally, to think collaborations or career advancements out of this fear of discrimination. If you're openly queer, if you're visibly queer, that might dissuade someone from giving you that collaboration project or that paper or this, that, and the other thing. So I definitely see what you're saying there.
Yeah, and then on the other I mean, on the other side of this is this assumption, and I feel like maybe with the LGBTQ community is a bit less prevalent than with other communities, but that you have extra privilege because you are from an underrepresented community. Right now, we are doing all these self-identification questionnaires, and that like, oh, okay, but you know, if you put that you are from the LGBTQ community, that's why you are there. That's why you are in this position. Right. That's why you were hired, to just tick those minority boxes. And I'm like, well, I mean, this is just, I don't know, I think a very narrow-minded perception
Absolutely.
at this stage. But that's like the other side, right? Like on one side you have like that fear that not fitting in, and on the other side is like, if you actually do well and thrive, then maybe that's wrongly assumed to be because just, okay, you are underrepresented and some people they are trying to lift you up and that's it. So that's
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's the idea of that you didn't get this yourself. It's more that you're just pushed into this role as a token, as a just check the box.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very true. But moving on that, do you feel like there are push, like for example, if we're talking about having to be out, do you think that there's a push that you need to be out, or otherwise, push there's not, like in your personal experiences within the research space?
I'll say
question. Yeah, then you can go first. Yes.
I think it's important for us to be like, not in the sense that there's ever been a pressure to do so, but I think it's important that we do so. The only way to change norms is to challenge them, to call out things when we see them, and to be what we want to see in science.
Mm-hmm.
So in a pressured sense, no, personally, but in a sense that like I want to be what I wish I had as a role model when I started academia, say like 6 years ago.
Very true. Raquel, do you have something to add on that?
You know, I would say that I agree with Benjamin. And the first thing he was mentioning was the lack of representation among faculty members. So, you know, we really feel perhaps that the responsibility of being that model, of being like, you know, if you see that is possible and you see that, you know, that gay man or a lesbian woman or a trans person is there in that position, that means that position is also for you, or could be also for you, right? Like, and that environment could be also your environment. And I think that that's really important. And, you know, perhaps that conflicts sometimes with the fact that we might want to be private our personal lives and perceive that, but at this stage, it's a really important trade-off on how that thing, that personal decision from you can impact many students or can impact many people within your environment.
That's true, especially if you're within a higher position within the academic sphere. You think about all the students that are seeing you and all the people that you're interacting with as well. Yeah. So jumping on that, Benjamin, I'll start with you first. What are some inclusive practices you think can be applied by students in the research environment to address any of these things that we've talked about?
I definitely think on a student level, just interpersonally, I think it's important that we call out injustices or microaggressions when we see them. It's often, you know, common politeness just to like not cause conflict, not shake the table, if you will. But this could obviously be done gently, but if when we let things slide, we reinforce a system that causes harm. So it doesn't have to be confrontational, but I think it's really important that we course correct when we see these things happening, because a lot of this stuff, we talk about these broad injustices, but like there is a really real reality of your day-to-day life of seeing these things happen, and just kind of we're trained to internalize it, where in truth we shouldn't have to, and we should strive not to. In my
Very
opinion.
true.
Yeah.
Very true. And I think also it's important to note, like, we think that all these interventions can be something very big, but can they also be small? Like, for example, for me, I just have a picture of me and my girlfriend on my desk. So it's like to say that there's not heteronormativity. You don't have to assume that everyone is cis, just like it's visual things, you know? That's very true.
Absolutely.
Raquel, for you, what role do you think professors, research staff, or administrative staff can play in this?
Yeah, I think we have, I guess, you know, a great responsibility here in creating those environments, in enabling those environments. You know, sometimes it's not only you with your more direct interactions, but like, as you were saying, like really small actions in the day-to-day can make big differences. I feel like on our end, we need to educate ourselves constantly. I mean, I still think I'm young, but perhaps as you grow older and the gap with your students grows, you need to be there. You need to learn how to navigate those realities, and even part of the 2SLGBTQIA plus community, we know that those realities change. You need to keep on it. And also, I guess something really important is that we are observant and ready to listen, because Benjamin was saying, some people might feel more comfortable calling things out or like just voicing it when it happens, but some others are just like, just will keep quiet, will be like more reluctant to speak, particularly if there is a power dynamic there. So I guess from the research staff, professors, or like people that might be on the other side, you'll be like, all right, this is not right. That those power dynamics should still not put you at risk of feeling like harmed or at risk of like not feeling comfortable in this research environment. So we need to be ready to listen to these situations and ready to act on them, and to enable those students or those postdocs to be able to be heard and to be safe. I guess to me is like to be safe in their environment.
Thank you for that. In line with your first point, you were saying that like you always have to learn about the students' experiments. So not to put you on the spot, but is there one thing you'd like to share about something you've learned recently, like as you go in as a professor?
That's a good one. So, I guess to me it helps the fact that I'm quite open about myself, and also about in the lab in general. So one of my students came to me, and I was writing a recommendation letter, and they said to me, "Oh, well, I have decided that I'm changing my pronouns, and can you please write the recommendation letter with the other pronouns?" And I felt like it was kind of a small thing, but also something that I'd have to be very comfortable, because I could have just gone misgendering, submitting the letter. It would have probably had the same effect, but that was not the reality. So they felt comfortable enough coming here and sharing that with me, and I was like, sure, of course. So I think that's this enables people to be who they are and to be comfortable with sharing those things. So to me, that was important. But I also felt, and I don't know what's your opinion, Amirah and Benjamin, like they had to be coming out all the time, like to have to be sharing these. I was like, it felt a bit like, okay, now I go by these pronouns, so can you please? And I'm like, okay, it's a constant, perhaps uphill sometimes, right?
The myth of the like coming out, where it's like you don't just like come out once. It's a series of coming outs. It's your day-to-day life. It's anytime you meet a new person. It's anytime, which there's a certain, you don't have to do that if you're, say, like not a queer person, and there's an assumption of these normativities, whereas we as queer people have to consistently reaffirm our own identities.
Yeah, exactly. Very true. There's one concept that I was hearing about recently was instead of coming out, it's inviting people to come in. So it's inviting people within your space, and it's like not having that negative connotation of you're in the closet and having to hide, but it's actually you're already out and people should just come into your space, which I thought was very, very uplifting.
I love that.
Yeah, so I share it with everyone. Okay, thank you. So now, next we'll go to the second part, and I just want to take a second here to remind everyone in the audience that if ever you have any questions that you'd like to submit for the panelists, please feel free to use the Q&A section of the webinar. So next we're going to part 2 of research design. So this is focusing on inclusive research design requires integrating EDI in all of the research phases. So I'll switch it up a bit, and first I'll start with Raquel, and then I'll go to Ben. So Raquel, can you tell us some of the possible challenges related to the inclusion of the 2SLGBTQIA community in the following parts of research design, mainly data analysis and dissemination of results?
I think we have been discussing quite a bit recently about how we have to think from the conceptualization stage of a project, right? Like not when you get the data and you're like, damn it, I now have to make my data fit because we didn't think about this before. So when we conceptualize projects, we need to think ahead and include, for instance, I'm talking about even biological sex and gender as a social construct. So if we think a bit of in this big genomics era where we have like larger and larger biobanks, you can observe that inconsistencies when you're trying to analyze the data and that be like, okay, male and female to see whether there is any sex or even self-reported gender-specific biases. You're like, all right, there is a difference between self-reported sex and what I can see from the genetic data on analyzing the XY chromosomes. And that, to me, that's like even more straightforward. But when you think of gender, you are relying on self-reported information, you are relying on questionnaires and whatever, if they are well-built or not well-built, they might be inclusive or not. And to me, always, I think of the same example, like we can think of something like mental health disorders and how we talk about, oh, this is more prevalent on male or female. So for instance, for female, it can be more prevalent like eating disorders or anxiety and depression. It's like, well, is this prevalent because of their sex, the biological sex, or is more on living as a female or living as a male, which is much more related to your gender, and allow me binary terminology here. But and also, if we think of what we think about more prevalent in men, like alcohol, substance abuse, is this really, that doesn't sound like a genetic thing. So if we have to consider gender, that might need to change to being less only male and female, but consider like, all right, who is living as a male or as a female, and considering also the realities in between. And one of the other things with regards to result dissemination, you asked me like 2 points. I was thinking about this before the meeting, before this webinar, and I think we, as a researcher, sometimes we are not very connected to society. Sometimes we are just like here in our own bubble, running our own like little lab experiments. But you may be conducting basic research that is working on like, I don't know, hormone regulatory networks. And, I want to consider who could be affected by these discoveries, right? Think of people are in hormone replacement therapies or on like going through transition processes. Like these findings that you may have directly in the lab, or like how estrogens work or how progesterone works or how testosterone works, might have impact on those treatment regimens. So these result dissemination might need to work directly with those communities to be able to make sure that these results reach them. And also something that I think will come up probably later today as well. I was thinking if you're researching HIV, I think this is one of the key examples. It is important to acknowledge the increased prevalence within the gay community, and particularly the gay community, and work on co-creating knowledge dissemination strategies, right? If you have research on side effects from the preventive methods, if you have research on side effects or on how, like, a new antiretroviral therapy or something like that, is something that you should consider in how you're disseminating your research whenever you get findings out of it.
There's so many good gems with that, especially the aspect of community engagement. That's something we really forget about as when scientists. We're just in our bubble, like you said, and that aspect of no, we're scientists within a community, so that means we need to engage the community is so true. So very true. Thank you. Benjamin, for you, can you tell us about any possible challenges related to definition of the research question, literature review, and data collection? So the other aspects of research design?
So in terms of definition of the research question, so there's definitely there's a historical bias in research, meaning that the studies often exclude or misrepresent two-spirit LGBTQIA plus individuals. So say like older genetic studies will only use a binary sex category, and because of that, it can create downstream issues with when you're trying to create a research question. For example, it can really impact your literature reviews. The existing knowledge is very shallow on the ground. It can create issues with supporting grant funding or grant designs. It proposes issues with really large gaps in the knowledge that we have on these communities because of a historic absence of previous work. So we have these questions and we don't really have enough of a background to delve forward. We're essentially doing science in the dark, which can be very, very difficult.
Very true. And also, if we think about it, if we're still having those gaps by doing this research, we're perpetuating those gaps. So the gaps just get bigger and bigger and bigger and not
Exactly.
filled. Yeah.
An example that comes to mind is often in genetic research, we just only consider people whose their reported sex and their genetic sex align with each other, not taking into consideration. And we make the assumption that that means it's something wrong with the sequencing itself, as opposed to potentially an intersex individual or an individual who lives their lives as presenting as one sex or gender, where genetically that might not be the case for one reason or another.
So I'll move on with you as well, Benjamin. What do you think are some opportunities for researchers to fix these challenges?
I think similar to what Raquel was speaking, like really emphasizing community engagement, working with community organizations, learn what their priorities are. That's coming from an anthropology background, that's a huge, huge thing when we approach our research questions. It's not just we want to do this as researchers. It's a question that we want to ask. It's one, does a community have an interest in it? And then also, does it benefit them in some way? So for thinking about the Two-Spirit LGBTQIA community, these organizations might have different priorities to what they need addressed comparatively to say, we as researchers it might be the most convenient or the most exciting or might be the most interesting paper, if you will. So instead, we really want to focus on when we're dealing with communities that have historically been marginalized, we want to give them the power of both the access to their own data, and then two, prioritizing questions and endeavors that they deem important.
Yeah. So exactly, just giving them the agency to decide what they want to research and what they don't.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, I guess in line with that as well is also remembering that different communities have different types of barriers in different situations. So if like in this webinar, we're speaking about the 2S LGBTQIA community as a whole, the 2S versus the lesbian versus the trans, all may have different experiences. Yeah.
Totally.
Raquel, would you like to bounce off of that or discuss any other challenges you see?
Yeah, I was thinking of what Benjamin was saying. I think one of the core things is particularly when you're dealing with a project that is specifically targeting one of these issues, like if you're studying challenges or you're studying a specific research question that involves the 2S LGBTQIA plus community, that's the co-creation is mandatory, right? Like if you had a research question and like you started doing it and then you realize in the middle of it, oh, actually this could be relevant, that is always, it's never too late. Like if you realize at some point and you have like you're already part of the data, or you're like, oh, okay, it would be good that we engage with the community. I feel like we have this thing of like, either the project is very direct and we engage from the beginning because that's, or we think it doesn't have anything to do, and then when we notice that maybe it has, then we are like, okay, whatever, but then we just continue, right? So I think it's important to acknowledge that it's never too early and it's never too late, because one cannot predict the findings. Like you might be mining the data set and then suddenly realizing, oh, actually there is this big discrepancy in this data set that I don't see in the other data sets. Why could that be possible? Or like I'm finding a larger proportion of individuals with like sexual chromosomal trisomies, and what could be happening in that specific region. So it's never too late to have that interest or that for that research question to come up, and then for you to be like, okay, I think it's important that we bring the community in and learn whether they could be interested and learn what is the best path forward for this project. I think that's.
Thank you for that. And I think it's like, as we're touching on these, bringing the community and addressing the gaps, we're also bridging into our third part of this discussion, which is focusing on the inequities towards the 2S LGBTQIA plus community and RNA therapeutics. So for here, there are so many inequities that our community faces, not only within RNA therapeutics, but also just in society in general. So we could basically spend this whole webinar even more discussing it. But for the few minutes we have left before we move into the Q&A session, I'd like to hear two specific challenges and opportunities from each of you to discuss these inequities. So first, I'll move to Ben. Can you tell us about the stigma experienced by the 2SLGBTQIA community in the RNA research field and what you think we can do to fix this?
So I believe a major issue we're seeing just based on previous breakthroughs in healthcare is there's often either an explicit or an implicit exclusion in clinical research or drug discovery. A notable example that comes to my mind immediately is that most pre-exposure prophylaxis medications, so drugs that prevent HIV/AIDS, are only clinically tested on people who are assigned male at birth. Does it work for the breadth of the human experience? And if not, why? Like where, like that is a research question within itself. If it only works in people assigned male at birth, why?
It's true, because also it's a big why, because is it why because of this is just how the drug works? Is it why because these are the biases that have been perpetuated within the research design, within the research practice, within the samples, the participants being recruited within the clinical trials, for example? So yeah,
exactly.
it's perfect. Thank you. Raquel, how about you? Do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, so I think maybe when we think of specific to RNA vaccines or RNA therapeutics, some of the attendees here might be better versed on those inequalities. I'm not sure we have sufficient information as of now, considering that it's a relatively, new, perhaps not new, but a widespread technology. And I was thinking about, if you have the example of the COVID-19 vaccinations, which is perhaps not really representative of because of how short the development times were. But one of the important points, and when I was following back in the day the clinical trials and where they were being run, some people were asking like, okay, we have clinical trials run in South Africa and deficiencies we are seeing might be lower with certain things. And they were saying, well, there is a large proportion of individuals in those trials that are HIV positive. And we were thinking, right, we have to consider that you might be or not on antiretroviral therapy. You might have a normal immune response as a result of that, or not at all if you don't have any therapeutics and you're just being seropositive. So this is, there were studies on those COVID-19 vaccinations, even on one of the mRNA ones, but also on the one from AstraZeneca, on like, okay, are the patients responding equally? And on, right, healthy individuals, but also considering an array of immunocompromised people. I'm talking about HIV because it might be more relevant for the LGBTQ plus community. And I think one thing that you said, Amirah, and I don't know if we have much time, but I think this is a really important point. So we cannot forget, and we have not said it at the beginning, but we are talking from Canada on a very Western perspective. I was browsing about, the information available for healthcare professionals to be able to attend the needs of the LGBTQ community, just on basic healthcare access, not even talking about like RNA therapeutics, just basic healthcare access. So here we like to think, okay, we have focus clinics, we have community centers, we have a specific research funding, or countries where LGBTQ realities are not understood or accepted and even criminalized. So we know that the story completely changes, and this will be accessibility to healthcare system in general, accessibility to any possible therapeutics, vaccines, people working on like things that could be very relevant for those communities, just not being an option whatsoever in other countries. So I think that's important to contextualize the fact that we are perhaps talking here about things that we see in our realities, and very privileged realities, even with all the issues that we can identify.
Yeah,
That's a really good point.
Yeah, exactly that. We're very privileged to even be able to be out, or in other places they're not able to be. So it's very true. And it's even criminalized. It can be, they can use your life for it just to have any types of hint, anything like that. So yeah. And even in addition to that, if you're thinking about HIV, some people either don't know that they're HIV positive or do not want to know because it's unsafe for them. So very good points. Ben, is there something you'd like to add in the last few minutes or so?
I think that's a really important thing that you mentioned, Raquel, just like understanding that while we talk about inequities, at least here in a Canadian context, we are in a uniquely privileged perspective, even within North America, of a country that prioritizes queer research and intersectionality in the way that it does. Coming up as an American myself, thinking about the way that research has been kind of systematically attacked in recent months by the current government in the United States, how precarious these things can be. So how important it is for us to continue to reinforce them. And it's not some sort of fad, if you will, to prioritize these things. It's something that like we have to be deliberate about the way that we incorporate these things into our research and not think about them solely in the sense of like a mandatory checkbox that we put on our grant applications. It's something that we should be baking in at all stages so that if someone were to come in the way that it's happened in the US with the pulling of funding from the NIH, from the NSF, it's not a buzzword, it's just the way the research is being conducted. It's the standard.
All these considerations are inherently embedded within the research, and it's not, you can't just take away one. It is, and it's there, and it will be there, and it will stay there. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, before we go into the question period, I'd ask each of you to share what are your final advice for people who want to be an ally to support the 2SLGBTQIA community. So I think I'll start with you, Ben, and then we'll end with Raquel.
I think a really big thing would be to listen, also to not if someone is trying to be constructive, say like how we discussed previously about calling out things that we notice in the workplace, noticing things that we see in research outputs and the way that things are discussed, like taking things in constructively is really important. Listening, being open to learning, being open to recognizing that your lived reality is your lived reality. It's not anyone else's, and someone else's lived reality can be entirely different than what you yourself experience. And giving that the space it needs in order for both of you to grow, I think is really important.
Thank you. Thank you. Raquel.
Well, I don't know if I have much to add to that. Benjamin was very eloquent. I will say also, to step away from stereotypes and to just stop putting everybody on the same box. I feel like when we think of ourselves as human beings, like I think of myself, I'm Spanish, I'm a woman, and I was like, I wouldn't never have to justify to the crowd 1,000 million times that I'm Spanish. Right, if I come from Spain, nobody's gonna be like, no, you are from Canada. Like, no, I'm not. So, right, just basic acknowledgement of a reality that a person is presenting to you with no judgment, just accepting it as the reality. It's really important. And I also feel like we have to learn and unlearn sometimes and relearn. We had this perception or this idea about what two is like, I don't know, non-binary persons should look like or should behave like, and you're like, well, and then you meet somebody and you're like, oh, but you don't fit my no, that's each person is his own world. And I think it's important just to approach that in a holistic manner and just meet the person and meet and learn about their realities. And I think Benjamin said it very well, like your life experience, their life experiences is like what brings different perspectives to the table, and just be ready to listen and learn. And
Thank you. I think that's a beautiful way to end it. Just listen and learn. Exactly that. So many beautiful gems that were dropped this entire session. It was wonderful. For the last 15 minutes or so, we'll move on to the Q&A session. I see we have one question here. It is very long, so give me a second to summarize. Essentially, the person wrote that they feel that many challenges that were mentioned are even more pronounced for non-white individuals, especially those from cultural contexts where acceptance of the LGBTQIA plus community, two-spirit LGBTQIA plus community, is limited or still emerging. As an international student from India and having spoken to other queer international students, they've seen how challenges often go beyond visibility in academia. So many of these challenges can include acceptance within the lab, navigating their identities while being far from home, oftentimes without having support from their own families. And then in addition, on top of that is the pressure to perform well in academia and professionally as an international student that make people hesitant. So that forced professionalism that's being pushed onto people is very true. So that said, some also feel a greater sense of belonging here, imagine in the candid and open space where people can be out if they feel safe to do so. Yes, especially with accepting a more open society and when proper support systems are in place. So the question is, could you speak to how institutions and mentors can better support queer international students navigating these layered challenges? I'll start with Raquel first, and then we'll go to Ben.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I was also thinking about it as I was reading the fact that we were discussing like right to end, and we are in a very here in Montreal, we're in a really multicultural community, and this means that people bring in their cultures and also bring in their the realities they live back where they come from, and a whole new reality that they can build or they will be building here. And I feel like even when I talk, I am white, or I perhaps consider myself white, so maybe I don't fit that box here, but I do consider myself an immigrant. And it is true that whenever you arrive to a new place, it's also an opportunity to find your space. And as mentors, I'm not sure at the institutional level, but as a mentor, I feel like I just try to make them feel like they belong from day one, right? Like this is your space, not only professionally and academically, which is something that I feel like, yeah, there is an extra pressure because you arrive to a new place and you need to feel to prove, like, no, you're already here. So somebody chose you for this position for a reason. Nobody's, being like, no, this is like, you're here. We gave you this position. You deserve to be here. So now focus on creating your space, focus on that. And I try to tell them that, like, this is not only your research, it's not only your PhD, it's also what is going to be your life for the next few years. So work on building that. Don't spend here 14 hours a day working like crazy, like this is going to be the only thing. No, work on building your life outside of work. And we try to do things even within the lab so that you are welcome. We try to organize activities that everybody feels included, from and cultural background, like trying to learn from each other, from their culture, but also being very open and very vocal about the fact that no realities are going to be judged here. Like, I think that sometimes just saying it out loud, it's really important. Like, you can come to me if you're experiencing anything like this. You can come to me here because this might not be a walk in the park, right? You come to a new country, you come to a new society, you come to a new lab, this might not be a walk in the park, but we are here. And we will learn together how to navigate this. I don't have the magic recipe, at least. I don't know. Benjamin has better, or like Amirah, but I don't have a magic recipe because, as you said, as Mashumi was saying or asking, these are really layered challenges. So, yeah.
Thank you. Ben, do you want to add something?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think it's really important that we acknowledge the intersection of discrimination and challenges towards equity. So not every person is just a singular identity. We are a beautiful mosaic of multiple interlocking things that might elevate us or contribute to the sense of isolation that we might be feeling. And I come from a privileged background myself, but as an international student, I know that a huge thing would be giving, at least for me, myself, what I really appreciated was having a soft place to land. The idea that like it's a really, really opaque system to navigate, lots of paperwork, lots of interviews and government stuff, which can be really scary. And then you're in a whole new place, and in a place like Montreal, there's a whole new language associated with it too. So having just someone to provide you resources and to invite you to things and to create community, I think is really, really important in the way that we foster a welcoming space for research, like for new researchers, international ones or otherwise.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's like you said, it's very important to remember that while we're doing this research, we're also people. So we have to bring in the people aspect and who we are. Um, so I think that's very true. So just looking through the chat.
Yeah, I was
Yes.
seeing that the chat was like bustling with
Yes. So before I see Mariloue, you have a question, but before I do that, I just want to take a note that someone else put it in the chat, at least to us, our panelists. The attendant said it's also someone who's Black African, a Black African, and being part of this community, it's also hard to try to learn these new systems and new culture and everything within. So like that challenge of having layers within all these learning opportunities is also something to consider. So I think it's very true. So thank you for that comment. Mariloue, if you want to ask a question?
Oh, thank you so much for this session. It was so interesting. Honestly, I took many notes, and I know I'll be using some of that information in our EDI actions. You raised a very important point. I think, Benjamin, you started with that by saying how important it is to call out certain situations, to not be like, I think, in the sort of status quo and just like say something and to challenge the norms. I'm thinking about people who might be a bit more shy to do that. I don't know if both Benjamin and Raquel, you can share about how to do that, like what to think about when we want to open this dialogue.
Oh, I can go first. I think that's a really good point. Like, not everyone is super comfortable being a vocal advocate for themselves or for others potentially. And I think from each perspective, if it's you yourself experiencing the thing, it could be on like a PI standpoint, like making sure that your students are really, really aware of the resources that already exist to say reporting or be an open ear for things, whether it's like instead of it being in private, it can be instead of it being in public, it can be a private conversation that's done with someone with either your PI or someone at McGill if it's something that you need to escalate, making that really apparent. Or if it's something that you're witnessing that you like in the moment, like let's say you watch something happen that you just like, in your heart is not right, but you don't like, you're not a type of person who can take a confrontation in that way. I don't know. It can mean the world to someone to pull them aside at some point and just be like, I see you and I'm really sorry that happened. It makes them, it can make someone that in a situation like that feel really seen, which I think is really important.
To find a reference point, to find that person that you could, find that support system when you are starting, when you're new, when you are facing, a lot of challenges because of your intersectionality. You're not just tackling one at a time, you have like a lot of them together, and it can be overwhelming. And I think these kind of events are also for, from us and from all the attendees here that I see them commenting that we are here. So, we are one email away or one call away from perhaps finding that person or that community of people that will allow you to push forward. And the community is here, so like reach out. Aside from the official resources, you might just need somebody to listen informally.
Allow the audience or any little gem, something, a nice little happy sunshine note that you'd like to share. I can start with Raquel and then you can end with.
Doesn't it? Okay, I'll try to be positive about this. No, I think what I was saying now, it's the most important thing, right? Sometimes when you are part of a minority or when you are part of that community and you are surrounded by an environment where you feel you don't belong, I will say, like, it's not going to be easy, but find that strength within you to work for change. You say, like, why is this my responsibility? Why things are not how they are supposed to be, right? But I've always thought that even a person has a lot of power to change and to make a positive impact in the environment that they are in. And then little steps at a time, you might be making the change for somebody else, and then somebody else might join you, and then you're just two working together or three working together. And to me, these events are like that, like, right, we are some voices, and then more voices are added up, and more voices are added up. And that first step, it's very hard. It is
Mm.
not, I'm not saying it's, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You might be frowned upon, you might experience microaggressions, macroaggressions. You might feel like you don't belong there, but you know, you do belong. So that's, find your support system, we're here.
Thank you. Ben, last point.
There's a saying in Judaism. There's a big tenet of our faith called tikkun olam. It's to fix the world, and which is something that I hold deeply to my heart in the way that it's our mission to make the world a better place from the way that we inherited it. And I think that when we platform people and provide safe spaces for people, we are slowly incrementing that mission. And when we elevate when we diverge from the norm of science, we are doing better science. When we bring in different perspectives and bringing in different backgrounds, we are doing better science, which can help better reflect the world that we live in and hopefully further help fix the world in our own way. So that's just sorry.
No, perfect. Thank you. It's such a beautiful way to end it. And I saw we had one last question in the chat, which I'll answer as I make my closing remarks. Someone asked whether Montreal was a welcoming environment for the 2SLGBTQIA community. So I'd like to say yes, it is. I thank you all for joining us, for both Raquel and Ben, for your wonderful thoughts. Thank you for Mariloue for hosting this. Thank you for everyone D2R who was involved in making this webinar such a beautiful thing. Also, happy Pride Month. So for people asking if Montreal is open, yes, happy Pride. We celebrate, we are here, we are heard, we are seen.
Confiette.
Yes. You'll notice in Montreal during the month of August, there is the Pride Festival. So you might see some events going on for people in the audience who don't know. Also, McGill has also the queer community that you can get involved in. If you're an employee, you can also have the queer, I think it's employee research group that you can join. So I encourage everyone to just look in, research. You can reach out to Raquel, me, Ben. I don't want to put you on the spot, but feel free to reach out. People can connect. And I hope everyone has a great afternoon and a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Happy
Bye.
Pride, everybody.